All right, welcome to today's Explainer. We're digging into a really eye-opening subject today, one that honestly might completely change how you view yourself and the people around you. Think about it for a second. You look around on any given day, and you see so many different types of people, right? Different cultures, different styles, different perspectives. But there is this massive, glaring contradiction right at the heart of our society. We live in a system that literally tries to force all these incredibly diverse, complex human minds into one single restrictive mold of success. So today we're going to break down exactly how society boxes in our brains and what it actually looks like to completely rethink how we measure achievement. Let's get into it.
So I want you to chew on this question. Have you ever wondered why some people just seem to glide effortlessly through school and their careers like they were practically born for it, while others feel like they are fighting a totally exhausting uphill battle every single day? Why do some really smart people constantly feel like they're failing? Are they just not trying hard enough? Or are we dealing with a completely flawed assumption that every human brain is supposed to operate the exact same way?
Well, let's look at the core of the problem. It's what our source material calls the illusion of a uniform system. Basically, our schools, our workplaces, our entire career ladder, they were all built on this one-size-fits-all model. But here's the thing, biological reality simply doesn't work like that. Neurodiversity goes way, way beyond this one narrow mold. So by sticking to this rigid system, society is basically ignoring the vibrant, varied reality of human biology and actively punishing anyone who doesn't fit the default settings.
To put that into perspective, think about the incredibly limited paths we're usually offered. Society pretty much hands you two lanes. You're either a numbers person with high numerical intelligence or a word person with high verbal intelligence. And if you don't naturally fit neatly into one of those two boxes, you instantly face pressure. But the reality of neurodiversity is a massive spectrum. There are so many unique brain structures out there. When we only celebrate verbal or numerical skills, we put a crushing, unfair weight on people who simply operate on a totally different wavelength.
Actually, let's go a layer deeper into the biology here, because this is fascinating. You know how society absolutely loves to praise people for having immense willpower or ironclad discipline? Well, a lot of the time, that's just an existential genetic gift. It's the luck of the draw. Some people are biologically wired to be easily distracted, while others are naturally resilient to it. So someone who hit the genetic jackpot might look like they have superhuman focus, and they'll confidently hand out advice on discipline without ever realizing that they aren't fighting the same biological battles as the person sitting next to them.
Let's look at a concrete example, the classroom. You have the kid who sits perfectly still, absorbs the lecture, and gets an A. Society calls them a good student. But then you have what's called the optical brain. This is a brain structure that relies heavily, almost entirely, on visual information. A student with an optical brain might completely bomb a standard listen-to-me-talk lecture. But give them visual aids, show them the information. They'll absolutely knock it out of the park. They aren't lazy. The information is just being delivered in a language their brain isn't wired to translate.
And that brings us to an incredibly misunderstood structure, the ADHD brain. Now, what's really crucial to grasp here is that an ADHD brain functions completely differently when it comes to dopamine regulation and executive functions in the frontal lobe. I really want to emphasize this. People with ADHD are not lacking knowledge. They are not lacking intelligence. What they are dealing with is an intense, overwhelming mental density because their brain doesn't automatically filter out all the background noise.
Okay, try to picture this. When a neurotypical brain walks into a room, it automatically tunes out the junk. It focuses right on the speaker. But an ADHD brain, it has no filter. While trying to listen to the teacher, that brain is simultaneously processing the speaker, the bird chirping outside the window, the faint buzz of the fluorescent lamp, and the kid tapping a pen 2 desks away, all at the exact same volume, all with the exact same priority. Imagine how utterly exhausting that sensory bombardment is. Honestly, it makes total sense why someone dealing with all that needs to fidget just to stay grounded, right?
Because of this structure, their brains are basically starved for dopamine. They run purely on gas and reward. So forcing focus on a topic they find boring is literal agony. But, and here is the real game changer, when they find something they are genuinely passionate about, they enter this state of hyperfocus. They lock in. And in that state, they can blaze through days' worth of work in just a few hours. It's a wildly different but incredibly powerful way of operating.
Okay, let's pivot for a second. We've talked biology, but we need to talk about the emotional toll this takes, especially at home. There's this huge illusion out there regarding family pride and family guilt. Because so many parents don't know about these structural brain differences, they completely misinterpret what's going on.
They look at their child's natural, biological, neurowiring, and they take it personally. They view it as a direct measure of their own success or failure as a mom or dad.
You know the drill, right? We've all heard it. Sit down, stop fidgeting, and don't get up until your homework is done. But remember, a child with an ADHD brain cannot sit still for 2 hours. They need frequent breaks. They need movement to regulate that dopamine. When parents, who mean well but just don't know, force them to sit like a statue, it doesn't build discipline. It just breaks the child's spirit. It crushes their enthusiasm and creates this awful, stressful cycle of failure at the kitchen table.
And then on the flip side, we all know that one parent at the dinner party, right? The one bragging because their toddler eats all their veggies and sleeps 12 hours a night, acting like it's a masterpiece of their own parenting. It's kind of funny, honestly, because while parenting effort obviously matters, so much of that is just pure genetic luck. You could take those exact same perfect parenting techniques, apply them to a child with a different neurobiology, and that kid still isn't going to sleep through the night.
But here's where it gets really heartbreaking. The parents of the kids who are struggling, they look at the bragging parents and ask themselves a devastating question: where did I go wrong? They carry this mountain of guilt. But the truth is, there's no failure there. That guilt is a total illusion, entirely manufactured by a society that refuses to acknowledge neurodiversity.
And hey, this issue doesn't just magically vanish when you turn 18 or graduate college. It scales right up with us. Neurodiversity has massive impacts on adult social dynamics and our friendships. Because we don't understand these differences, we end up with a severe lack of empathy in our adult relationships.
Let me ask you this. Have you ever gotten truly offended or even cut off a friend because they took a day to reply to a text or they showed up late to coffee? A neurotypical person who can easily text 10 people while making lunch assumes everyone else can do that too. They project their standard brain capabilities onto their neurodivergent friend. So when the friend is late, they think, oh, they just don't care about me. And then they apply guilt and pressure, completely misunderstanding the situation.
And what makes it worse is that you go online and you see these toxic pop psychology gurus giving terrible advice. They literally tell you if someone is late or if they're distracted, it's blatant disrespect. Cut them off. It's so harmful. It completely ignores structural brain realities. All this kind of rigid, superficial advice does is take people who are already struggling to navigate a world not built for them and forces them into deeper isolation.
So, what's the fix here? How do we actually change this dynamic? Well, the answer is that we have to fundamentally rethink our criteria for success. We need to actively tear down that one-size-fits-all model, starting right in our own homes, our own friend groups, and our own workplaces.
It really comes down to this. Drop the judgment and pick up structural awareness. We need to take the time to understand the unique working principles of the people we care about. Figure out what guidance methods actually click for them. We have to replace our rigid, default expectations with a real, empathetic acceptance of genetic and behavioral differences. That is literally the only way we are going to build healthier families and stronger adult relationships.
So I'm going to leave you with one final thought to mull over today. Are you holding the people in your life, or perhaps even yourself, hostage to a standard that simply wasn't built for them? Maybe what's missing isn't willpower or respect or effort. Maybe it's just an understanding of how beautifully different our brains are wired. Just imagine what your relationships could look like if you replace judgment with genuine empathy. Think about it. Thanks for hanging out with me for this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.